Elena, don't make everything heavy. You're just the behind-the-scenes person in this family. The sentence landed right at my brother Evan's engagement dinner, at a downtown Portland restaurant where dark wood walls and soft lighting were designed to make everyone inside look like they were doing fine. But I knew it wasn't just a reminder. It was a verdict, spoken softly so no one could accuse her of cruelty. Elena isn't family here. Elena is the function. If one day your family calls you by a role instead of your name, who are you then? I'm Stella, and that's the story of Elena Brooks, a girl who once believed silence was how you kept the peace, until silence became the thing people used to push her out of her own life. Before I go on, if you're listening to this story at a late hour, in the kitchen, on the couch, or after everyone else has gone to sleep, leave me a comment and tell me where you are and what time it is for you right now. If this story touches you even a little, hit like and subscribe so we can get through a long night together and stay until the end to find the moment that changed the way Elena saw herself. One small note, said gently. This video is made with the help of AI and edited by humans to offer a reflective perspective, not to encourage anyone to copy what the characters do. My seat at the table tonight was still in character, 2 chairs away from Evan, close enough to hear every polite but sharp line, far enough that no one truly asked how I was doing. Evan looked relaxed, confident, like he'd been wearing the suit of a future pillar for years. Cate, his fiancée, sat across from me. She didn't say much, but she watched a lot. Mom's hand rested on my shoulder, light, but it felt like a latch. The moment she touched me, I slipped back into the familiar position. Smile at the right time, stand at the right time, disappear at the right time. Don't react. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass Mom. Those lines ran through my head like an old prayer. But beneath the calm, there was a tiny crack. And for the first time, I understood how many years I'd spent learning to be worthy by making myself smaller. Dad lifted his glass and talked about a big future. Evan smiled, and everyone smiled along. Then Cate suddenly looked straight at me. No pity, just recognition, like she'd realized something. She leaned in slightly, her voice falling into the space between forks and knives. Sorry, can I ask, are you the one who said you don't have to carry the whole night alone? Cate paused for a beat, so small, like someone unexpectedly hearing a voice they once clung to in the dark. Before I could answer, Dad's laughter pulled the room back into the right rhythm. Mom gave my shoulder a light squeeze, familiar, not hard, but enough to remind me not to push dinner off script. In the Brooks family, everything has a measuring stick. Evan is the pride, and my part, in their eyes, always sits under the word, still figuring it out. A way of saying, not there yet, while keeping a smile. This VIP room was built to show off what you can see. Titles, salaries no one says out loud, but everyone guesses. Homes, 5-year plans. I used to have a nice job like that, the kind that made people nod when they heard it. Then a season came quietly. Caring for a family member forced the rhythm of my life to change. Leaving that job wasn't weakness, it was seeing something simple. Sometimes the right thing is being truly present for someone who needs you. But at this table, things like that get heard as emotional, and then sealed with the familiar label, unstable. Elena's still finding her direction, Mom said, when someone asked how I'd been. Her voice was kind, like laying a thin blanket over my shoulders in front of everyone. But inside it was a frame, one that kept me forever in the not there yet spot. The napkin sat on my lap like a small shield. My fingers unconsciously turned a cheap ring, something I bought at a little shop near Powell's just because it reminded me I could still choose something for myself. I looked up and caught Cate still watching, not looking away. In that moment, what hurt wasn't being criticized. It hurt to be narrated, like my life was just a subtitle under my brother's. And the coldest truth was this: I'd let it go on for too long. Evan leaned back with a half smile. Elena is always different, he said. The table laughed politely. Mom quickly added sweetly, that girl, she always makes things harder on herself. Each line sounded like a small lock, locking me into sensitive, hard to understand, so the next thing could happen smoothly, like it had been rehearsed. Mom leaned in, asking as if it were perfectly natural, Elena, take a few pictures for us, and remind the server to bring more water. Oh, and check the gift list. My body started to stand on autopilot, emotion trained into me over years. And right then, her earlier sentence lit up in my mind like a small lamp. You're just the behind-the-scenes person in this family. My hand reached for the phone, then stopped. Just 1 second, but long enough to see the fork in the road, slide back into the old role to keep things peaceful, or choose one small thing that would shift the room's unspoken rule. I set the phone down, face down, like a period at the end of a sentence. I smiled just enough and said slowly, "I'm going to pass on being the photographer tonight. I want to sit and eat like a member of this family." No one yelled. No one got angry. But the room paused for a beat, like a song slipping off its familiar drumline. Evan laughed to pull it back onto the track. "Don't be sensitive." Mom patted my shoulder, the pat adults use when they're soothing a child who's being too much. The lock of contempt clicked shut, loud and clear. Strangely, it didn't make me shrink the way it used to. The fear of being seen as difficult was still there, but tonight it weighed less than the exhaustion that had lasted too long. Cate didn't laugh along. She watched closely, from her earlier question to the way the phone had been set down, to the table's reaction, as if I'd broken a rule they assumed would last forever. The air started to feel heavy. I used a small excuse to step outside. I needed some air. The door closed behind me, and the restaurant's sounds returned to normal. Staff calling to each other, the faint smell of coffee, a hallway that was brighter and more real, like life when it isn't a performance. Near the women's restroom, an older woman stood slightly unsteady by the sink. Phone in hand, her voice still shaking as she finished a call. Her purse was open, a few things visible: tissues, a small bottle of water, a pill case. She stood still for a moment, like she didn't know where to go next. Without asking much, I stepped close enough not to startle her and said softly, "Would you like to sit down for a minute?" Then pointed to the bench along the wall. I handed her tissues. I reminded her to breathe in slowly, breathe out long. Her breath started fast, then steadied. When she looked up, eyes wet, the familiar line came out, the line I'd said to so many people late at night, the kind that can't fix everything but can keep someone from slipping. "You don't have to carry the whole night alone." Footsteps stopped at the doorway. Cate stood in the threshold, still holding her phone, like she'd followed a feeling. She heard the entire sentence. Her face changed fast, not polite surprise, but the look of being pulled back into a private memory, where a similar line once held her through a dark stretch. I started to step back to protect their privacy, but Cate didn't look away. Her gaze was like someone matching a voice in her head to the person standing in front of her, and in that brief moment, why her question at the table had been so right became clear. Some families use success as their spotlight, and without meaning to, they turn the people who save others in the dark into invisible ones. But if tonight the invisible person is called by the right name, who will be the most unsettled? If you've ever been the one carrying the night for your whole family, leave a comment. "Just me too" is enough. And if you want to hear what happens next, hit subscribe. I'll keep going. Back in the VIP room, everything still looked polished, like a color-corrected photo. Candles burning evenly, glasses refilled on cue, laughter just loud enough to cover the quiet gaps. But the feeling inside me was different. As soon as I sat down, Mom's eyes swept over me like she was checking whether an object was still in the right place. Dad picked up his unfinished story about Evan's future, his voice warm with the kind of certainty that believes itself. And somehow the topic swerved back to me, smoothly, caringly. "You should think about stability," Mom said, her voice pouring like tea. "You can't just do something and live like that forever." Dad nodded and added, "The world is hard right now, and for a daughter, you need support." Evan gave a small smile, like he'd heard this story before. Someone else chimed in politely, "Yeah, eventually you have to think about family." None of the words sounded cruel. They sounded like advice, like love. But the longer I listened, the more I felt how they were packaging me into something easy for other people to understand. A girl who needs to be managed, needs to be taken care of, needs someone to straighten out her life. And I realized the sharp point inside that kind of concern. It makes me smaller, so they can feel calm. When they said, "We're worried about you," what they were really saying was, "We're worried about how we feel when we look at you." Cate sat across from me and no longer smiled along. Her social smile had disappeared at some point, replaced by a quiet focus. She looked straight at me like I was a real person, not a role in a family story. That look made my back straighten slightly. Not because I was being praised, but because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to edit me into a shape that fit them. Mom's hand returned to my shoulder, the same weight, just enough to say, "Be quiet." Before, that touch would snap me back into the right mold, like buttoning a crooked button. But this time a different reflex appeared. Slow, clear, unhurried. I lifted my hand and gently moved Mom's hand off my shoulder. Very slowly, very politely. Like unhooking a hanger from a collar so it wouldn't pull the fabric with it. The motion was small enough that anyone not looking directly might miss it. But the whole table saw it. Because the moment Mom's hand left my shoulder felt like a door closing. No slam, but final. "Please don't touch me like that in front of other people," I said. The line came out soft and short. No raised voice, no argument, no long explanation. Just a boundary set down on the table like setting down a glass. Clear and without apology. The room went quiet instantly. Not the kind of quiet from deep offense, but the kind that comes when an unspoken rule has just been broken. She always takes it. Dad stopped mid-thought like he'd forgotten what he was about to say. Evan forced a tight smile, searching for a joke to pull everything back to the fun rhythm. But Cate didn't help them. She kept looking at me, eyes steady, as if she were watching something more important than the dinner itself. In that silence, my phone buzzed softly on the table. A text from Cate popped up. Just one line, but it shifted my heartbeat. "After dinner, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes." The screen stayed lit for another second, then I turned the phone face down, like setting aside something I needed to keep private for later. In the VIP room, conversation tried to restart, but it wasn't smooth anymore. The caring lines suddenly sounded off-key, like someone reading a script after the lead actor has decided not to perform. I asked to step outside for a minute. This time it wasn't to run. It was to hear my own breathing clearly. In the lobby, the big glass doors faced the street. The American night was cold and clean in a way that wakes you up fast. Cars slid under the streetlights, their trails stretching and fading, steady as a reminder that the world keeps moving, even if a dinner table goes silent for 1 minute. Memory came without being invited. The first time I learned to smile it off, so Mom wouldn't be upset. A small smile, swallowing a response, telling myself, it's family, and the feeling of apologizing even when I wasn't wrong, as if an apology was the entry fee to stay inside the warmth. Those habits didn't form in one day. They were trained through meals, phone calls, and all the times I was told, "Don't make it tense," until silence became reflex. That was my mistake. Staying quiet for too long made them think it was their right. The right to put a hand on my shoulder in front of other people, the right to narrate my life for me, the right to wrap me in, "We're worried about you," so they could feel like good people. Footsteps came from behind. Evan walked out, his face a little flushed from wine and irritation, even as he tried to keep the model big brother tone. "You ruined the vibe," he said, looking at me like a kid who'd dropped a glass. "Everyone's having fun. Why do you have to make it tense?" The line was so familiar it almost felt empty. But tonight, I could hear what lived under the word fun. Their fun depended on me not speaking, on me making the photo look good. I didn't argue. I didn't explain how tired I was. Instead of talking, I pulled a small, sticky note from my pocket, the one the server had set beside the check. There was already a pen in my bag. I wrote a single sentence, my handwriting as ordinary as a grocery list. Then I handed it to Evan. "I'll attend the wedding as a guest, not as behind the scenes." Evan looked down like he couldn't believe I meant it. He let out a short laugh, then his expression tightened. "What's wrong with you?" His voice jumped slightly, and his eyes flicked inside like he didn't want anyone to hear. "What are you trying to make people think?" "Whatever they think," I said, calm and clear. I didn't add anything that would open the door to a debate. Evan started to speak again, but I repeated the rule once, still steady. "I'll come as a guest." That moment made one thing clear: boundaries don't need anger. They need repetition and consistent action. No need to beat anyone, just don't step back into the old role. I went back inside to grab my coat. My hand had barely touched the edge of the thick fabric when I heard heels stop right behind me. When I turned around, Cate was there, not across the dinner table anymore, but standing at the exact distance of a real conversation. She was close enough that I could hear the steady breathing she'd been forcing all through dinner. The hallway light hit her face and revealed a tension that the makeup and smiles in the VIP room had covered. Cate looked at me like someone who had just found a missing piece, but was still afraid she might be wrong. "I'm sorry," she said softly, lowering her voice like she didn't want to touch someone else's private life. I need to be sure." Cate swallowed, her eyes slightly red, but not spilling over. "More than a year ago, there was a night, really late." My house was exhausted then. Not drama, just tired to the point where everyone was afraid one more sentence would make everything collapse. She paused, weighing how much to say. I didn't push her. Some things, if you go on too long, turn into spilling. If you say just enough, they keep their truth. I called a support line, Cate continued, because I didn't know who to talk to without making my family even more worried. I just needed to hear a calm voice, a voice that didn't try to fix me, didn't tell me to be strong, just helped me breathe again. I understood. I'd heard hundreds of voices like that. Women calling close to midnight when they'd done everything all day, and there was still a part of the night no one carried with them. They didn't need advice. They needed somewhere to set their fear down for a few minutes. Cate looked straight at me, and this time the question came like a thread being pulled out of a tangled spool. You're the one who said you don't have to carry the whole night alone, right? The air around us suddenly went quiet. I didn't feel the need to explain my job, didn't feel the need to list what I'd done to earn that sentence. The feeling of having to prove myself disappeared. I just nodded. Yeah, I said. I was there. Something in Cate's eyes softened, like she'd just been reassured her memory wasn't made up. She let out a long breath, then smiled very faintly, not to look pretty, but to say thank you in the right place. I thought I'd never see you again, she said. I didn't know your name. I only knew that sentence. It kept me here. I slipped my coat onto my shoulders, my hand brushing the collar like I was touching reality. A simple thought passed through my head, but it felt heavy. My family had never once asked what I did to make a life, but a stranger remembered my words from a night they nearly broke. Cate turned and walked back toward the VIP room first. I almost said, "You don't have to," because I didn't want the dinner to turn into a stage. But she'd already decided. The door opened, laughter and voices rushed in, and the whole room automatically slowed when Cate stepped into her position. Fiancé, the person people listened to. She didn't make a scene. She didn't tell a long story. She simply raised her glass, looked around the table with a steady, grown-up gaze, and said a thank you so proper that everyone felt its warmth. If it weren't for Elena, my family wouldn't have made it through that period. My father's glass froze midair. Mom went completely still. Evan blinked like someone had switched the scene on him. For 1 second, I saw what they were forcing themselves to swallow. They had just put down someone that another person had just called the one who helped when the night was longest. There was no satisfaction, no desire to be paid back, just a breath loosening inside my chest, like I didn't have to stand on a stage anymore to prove I existed. Mom looked at me. This time it wasn't the checking look, and it wasn't the soothing look. It looked like a question that hadn't made it into words, a question she'd swallowed for years. Her lips parted, as if she were about to say something for the first time. Then Mom's phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen, and her face changed so fast, it was like all the weight drained out of her. Her hand tightened around the phone. No one heard a single word, but I could clearly see the real panic behind her eyes. And in that exact moment, I understood. Mom's long night might be beginning. The phone in Mom's hand kept buzzing lightly like a heart out of rhythm. Dad leaned in and asked softly. Evan looked over Mom's shoulder, and Cate stood still, as if she understood something had just touched this family. Not reputation or appearances, but a very human fear. Fear that an older loved one is in trouble. Fear the night will be longer than you thought. I didn't ask right away, not because I was cold, but because I'd learned that, in the first minutes of panic, words can turn into sharp edges. Mom looked up, her eyes trying to pull me back into the familiar role, the behind-the-scenes person who would smooth everything out. Except this time, that role wasn't safe anymore. It cost too much. Tonight, I'm going to head home first, I said, light enough not to draw more eyes. If you need anything, text me. Not running away, just ending it at the right moment so the boundary I just built wouldn't be knocked down by a wave of emotion. Cate stepped closer and touched my elbow lightly like a kind goodbye. I'll call you later, she whispered. I nodded. I pulled my coat up on my shoulders, and the VIP room door closed behind me like the closing of a chapter that had lasted too long. Outside, the cold night hit my face, clean and blunt. Cars passed on the street like short streaks of light that vanished. After a few steps, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Messages from my family poured in, sometimes soft. Text Mom when you get home, sometimes accusing, why did you make everything so tense? Sometimes like nothing happened. A photo of the table in the family group chat, captioned, such a wonderful night. The lines stacked on top of each other, like they were trying to paint over a crack that had just shown. I didn't answer right away. My thumb hovered over the screen, and a part of me wanted to explain, to make it clear there was no resentment, no disrespect, just exhaustion. But memory cut in immediately. Long explanations had never made them understand. They only drained the one doing the explaining. In the parking lot, the sound of the car door closing created just enough quiet. I opened my notes. The dashboard light fell across my hand, making it look like the hand of someone more grown, no longer a daughter who had to ask permission to exist. 3 lines were typed fast, no extra words, no long explanations, no behind-the-scenes roll, no reacting in the middle of a spike. Short, but it felt like stepping onto solid ground after years of standing on something slick. As soon as the car rolled out of the lot, Cate called. Her voice on the line wasn't rushed, wasn't nosy, and wasn't stirred up. "Are you okay?" The question was so simple, my throat tightened, because it had been too long since anyone asked Elena like they were asking a person. Not a problem to fix, not a role to maintain. "I'm okay," the answer came out, then a little more honest. "I'm learning how to be okay." Some families don't mean to be cruel, they just get used to placing every worry onto the quietest person. But when that container gets set down, who will learn to carry their own share of life? If you've ever been the one who stayed quiet so the whole family could stay calm, what would you do when you start saying no? Leave me a comment, because your answer might help someone else tonight. And if you want to hear what Elena does next, subscribe. Cate paused for a beat, then said slowly, "Tomorrow, could you meet me for coffee for 5 minutes? I don't want to pull you into anything. I just want to talk like 2 women." Those 3 lines in my notes sat there like a railing. Boundaries aren't about closing doors. They're about choosing which door you open and why you open it. "Okay," I said. "Coffee only." That yes didn't feel like asking permission. It just felt like stepping towards something better. The next morning, the cafe Cate chose was on a quieter corner than downtown. Big glass windows, cinnamon in the air, a few older people reading paper newspapers like an unhurried habit. I arrived a few minutes early and picked a table by the window. When Cate walked in, she didn't carry the perfect fiancé look from last night anymore. Not messy, just less performed. Simple coat, hair tied back, that faint under-eye shadow of someone who has stayed up late worrying. She sat down and set 2 coffees on the table like a kind way to begin. "I'm not here to ask more about your family," Cate said right away, like she didn't want me to go on guard. "I just want to thank you and say that last night I saw you." It was strange because it wasn't praise. It was just acknowledgement, like acknowledging a chair in the room, an existence that didn't need explaining. Because of that, my shoulders loosened a little. Cate shared a little more about the night she called the support line, not to drag me into her pain, just to place something real on the table, like setting your keys down before you walk into a home. Then she said very softly, "Some days I think if I say it out loud, people will call it drama. But really, it's just overload. No one saved anyone in that conversation." Cate didn't turn me into a hero, and she didn't demand forgiveness or reconciliation. She just looked at me like she was looking at someone who had lived honestly, and that was enough to make one thing clear. I didn't need to win against my family. What I needed was a life I didn't have to ask permission to live. On the way home, an idea came naturally, like a thread pulled from last night's sentence. You don't have to carry the whole night alone. If a sentence like that could hold someone through a night, then maybe what night people need isn't lofty advice, but a place to set their worry down without being judged. A small night table was built from ordinary things, a private online group, plus a few short meetups at the community library, each one just an hour. The rules were written clearly, like a sticky note on a fridge. No judging other people's families, no telling stories to tear anyone down, no forcing anyone to be strong. Just share what you're carrying, learn how to set boundaries, and remind each other to care for yourself in small ways. The first meeting had 4 people. An older woman sat next to me, holding a mug of hot tea, eyes on the tabletop, like she was afraid of taking up space. When it was her turn, she said very softly, "I thought I was the only one awake." My throat tightened in a quiet way. Not a huge wave of emotion, just a simple truth. I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Everyone had just been silent out of embarrassment. My family's messages kept coming, sometimes steady, sometimes scattered. Mom asked, "Are you coming for Sunday dinner?" Like last night's party never happened. Evan sent a meme to lighten the mood. Dad texted one blunt line, "Don't make your mother worry." I replied briefly, politely, with conditions. no hatred, no sinking back in. Those 3 rules in my notes stayed like a railing, enough to keep me from slipping. What I lost over years of silence wasn't exactly love. The biggest loss was the illusion that silence could buy respect. When that illusion dropped, the emptiness at first was scary, but then it made room for a different future, a future that didn't sit at someone else's dinner table, but at the small table I built myself, where night people could sit down and breathe again like a human being. Time didn't turn me into the winner at that engagement dinner. No speech, no one bursting into tears to apologize in front of everyone. What happened was quieter, but more real. I stopped disappearing just so other people could feel comfortable. The day I stopped being behind the scenes, my family could still laugh, still throw parties, still live. Only now they couldn't lean on my silence like a soft cushion anymore. Sometimes sitting alone, I admitted what I hadn't wanted to name. I used silence as a way to ask to be loved. I held back so the house would stay calm. I smiled so Mom wouldn't be sad. I apologized so calls wouldn't end mid-sentence. But love like that wore me down to the point where I thought it didn't matter whether I was there or not. And when Cate looked at me that night like she was looking at a person, I finally realized I didn't lack value. I only lacked a place to set that value down without asking permission. What I learned sounds simple, but you have to live it to understand. Boundaries aren't about shutting doors. Boundaries are naming which door leads back to you. When you know which door is yours, you don't have to lock every other one. You just stop standing at someone else's threshold, waiting to be invited in. I didn't declare my family right or wrong. Maybe they never meant to be cruel. Maybe they just measure life by their own ruler. But from now on, I won't let anyone call my life behind the scenes again, even when it's said in a gentle voice and wrapped in the word concern. I'll keep contact at the level I can handle, reply when I'm calm, meet when there's respect, leave when I'm pulled back into the old role. No revenge, no punishment, just self-protection, the ordinary kind of self-protection adults learn. The night table kept going. Some nights only a few people came into the group, some nights more. Some people said nothing, just listened and left a single dot. Some people said, for the first time, I'm tired. Those small things don't make headlines, don't impress anyone, but they make someone feel a little less alone during a long night. And I realized the value I create isn't in proving to my family who I am. It's in being a gentle support so someone else doesn't have to carry it alone. The story you just heard is fiction, inspired by real-life situations and human emotions. This video is made with the help of AI and edited by humans to offer a reflective perspective, not to encourage you to copy or act like the characters. If there's one small gift in this story, maybe it's simply this: you don't have to disappear to be loved. Before you go, let me ask you something simple. Where are you listening from? California, Florida, Texas, or somewhere quiet outside the United States? And what time is it where you are right now? If any part of this touched you, leave a comment. Sometimes just writing, "Me too," is enough to help someone else feel less alone. If you think this could help someone you love who's up late worrying, share it with them. Hit like if you want me to keep telling stories that are gentle but deep like this, and subscribe so we can meet again in the next video. Thank you for being here. Staying to the end is also a way of being kind to yourself. That night, when I got home, I turned off the kitchen lights, but I left a small lamp on the counter, just enough light to see the path through the dark. Like a gentle reminder, the night can be long, but it doesn't have to be alone.